Welcome to Stories and Songs by Afterglow Music. My name is Joel McCausland.
And I'm Kevin Peay, and we've been creating music for a long time.
We'd like to tell you the stories behind our songs. Kev, I was thinking we ought to return to a song that you wrote a long time ago. I think it was during your mission or right after. It's called Armor of Truth.
Yeah, it was during my mission, serving in Missouri, St. Louis, before I was called to Nauvoo. I got to Missouri, St. Louis in December of 81, because we were in the MTC together December of 80.
And then the year turned over, and that was when we started.
And I remember when I landed, it was minus 70 wind chill. And I'm like, what in the world have I done?
Welcome to St. Louis.
Welcome to St. Louis. And we got through that whole thing, and I got my first assignment out to Manchester, Missouri, and I get my companion, and off we go, and I'm just like, whoa, this is different than the MTC. It's a lot colder. They had heat in the MTC. And you were there at the same time, and we have all kinds of stories we can talk about the MTC.
Yep.
But anyway, I get to Missouri, St. Louis, and then I get to my new mission president's interview, and he was fairly new. Leon Hartshorn is his name, from Orem, Utah. And he was one of the deans, I believe, of religion at BYU. And
yeah, name's familiar.
And he had organized a book called Put on the Whole Armor of God. Mm-hmm. And when I got there, for some reason, somebody had said something about music, and that maybe I had goofed off with it.
They knew you were coming a little bit. Yeah. Yep.
You know, we go back to the Joe Christensen,
we've done some things in the MTC.
I remember him saying to me on that interview, that entrance interview, he said, "You've done some music." And I said, "Yeah, a little bit, not much." But he said, "Okay, well, I want to talk to you about that a little bit more." So I get out to my new area, and then it wasn't but a couple of months, he comes back and calls me back in the office for my interview. He simply said, "I'd like you to write a song that we could take to the members in Missouri and Illinois, and kind of theme it." And I said, "Well, what's your theme?" And he said, "Well, I'm really all about the whole armor of God." And of course, then I just immerse into the epistles of Paul, and I get into Ephesians chapter 6, and I really get into, verse 14, and off it goes. And we'll talk about that because we put that tag on this song. So off I go. What he didn't tell me was the timing that I needed to have this by. And he said, "Oh, could you have it written by tomorrow for the mission conference?"
Isn't that awesome? I mean, it's on one hand, it's really cool when somebody comes to you and says, "I have an idea for a song and I'd like you to write it." That's nice. That's a cool thing. Great request. And then sometimes they don't really know what it takes.
Well, it kind of follows the same pattern of the way I write songs now, right?
Yeah, just jump in and do it, right?
Yeah, just, we need a song in the studio, and then I have to hurry and make one up. And so
set the pattern early, I guess.
So anyway, I said, "You're kidding, right?" And he said, "No." He said, "I'd like you to really pray about this, and I'll expect the song to be ready tomorrow."
Test of faith, maybe.
So it was a test of faith.
Yeah.
And so I immediately got on my knees back in my apartment with my companion, and I said, "We got to find a church." So we went to the church in Manchester, and somebody let us in, and I went to the piano, and off it went. But the whole theme of this was the whole armor of God. You'll notice that as we've done other songs moving forward, this was the very beginning of the next version, Warriors of Light. Then there was a next version called Find the Power. Then there was the other version called Victory of Truth. Uh-huh. And for some reason, I just kept this armor thing going.
Courage, honor, power. Warriors of our Father with shields of truth in our hand. Courage to follow the Savior, in unity we will stand.
Well, too, it took me a while to catch up, but it actually inspired some songs for me, too. The idea of like standing as a witness and being able to share some of the same kind of, I call them anthems, they're big, bombastic kind of songs, usually had a good orchestra behind them and a lot of sound, and they're cool because they have a different feeling and a different spirit about them. It's like a call to arms. Let's go out there and fight this battle. Armor of Truth got us started in a great direction.
So you're in Japan at this time, and he's asked me to do this. Well, one thing leads to another, and I go to the conference, and the song came, and heaven blessed me with whatever this turned out to be.
Mm-hmm.
But it's one that we decided to put on the album Someone Is Listening
Right.
in 1983 when we returned. But it was really my first thought through the process of, can you really pull down the powers of heaven and ask the Lord to bless you with something that quick and to make sense of it and then not destroy it in mission conference? So not only do you have to, you got to read the music and you got to remember how to play it at the same time. And so we somehow I pulled it off, and it did become it became the
Kind
anthem.
of your theme song, right? For your mission,
Yeah,
right?
for our mission.
Yeah.
And he used that a lot. And then he asked me to go in front of him in many different areas that he was going out into the mission field to be able to have a little fireside with the members so that he could come in and teach them, because he was starting to lay down some new rules and some new ideas for member missionary contact with elders and sisters, timing of how long that should be, and it was quite a change. And so I got to be his
You were his
front-
advance man. Right?
I was his front act
front man.
for a while, but the rest of the story goes on.
That's such an interesting thing. I was thinking about that the other day. So I did a song for my grandson's baptism the other day. And I got a comment on that song when I posted it online from my mission president's wife. And like many missionaries, I had 2 mission presidents. They had their transition during the time I was in the field. And I've reflected on this more than once, but I really feel like you see a pendulum swing. You see a president comes in and he feels the need, and it's inspiration to tighten the ship, maybe, to say, okay, we've been doing it this way. No shade on my predecessor, but there's a need for us to tighten up maybe the discipline, maybe the practice or the policy or whatever else. And it almost feels to me like in many missions, it literally is one and then the other. Like it goes way over here, or at least quite a ways over here, and then it comes swinging back the other direction. And maybe the next mission president is a little more flexible, a little more relaxed. And both are necessary. Both are necessary for the mission, and maybe more specifically for the missionaries and the members that are in the mix at the time. And I remember you talking about President Hartshorn that way, that he had a pretty clear, defined sense of what was okay and what was not. And he taught it. And you helped him do that.
And reflecting on what you're saying, that the armor of truth, as we were going through that whole process and as we were going out and introducing him through music, there was an outgrowth of this. And for some reason, he wanted me to expand it a little bit more. So every companion I got, specifically when I left my companion in Missouri, I went to Illinois and was up on Champaign-Urbana. And he tried an experiment where he called young elders to zone leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And
like young in the sense that they were newer in the mission?
Mm-hmm. And I had been 4 months in, and all of a sudden I'm now going to be a junior zone leader. And I go to Champaign-Urbana on the college campus.
Mm-hmm.
And then my companion who was training me at that point in time, he gets transferred. And they bring another companion in who is fairly new as well. And here we are as a couple of zone leaders.
You've been out 6 months.
Yeah. And then we get a phone call that says, now we're going to try a new experiment. We're going to separate you two in 2 different cities as zone leaders, and you're going to train new missionaries.
Interesting.
So these 2 new missionaries that came in, they were on one side of the area, we were on the other side of the area, and then we had to still go travel as zone leaders. And so we put these 2 new missionaries together, and they would be on their own.
On their own,
so,
and they've been out there for a few weeks.
So we had to train them up really, really quick, the best we could. But what he had me do at that point in time with this other zone leader was to go and do more firesides out into the Illinois area.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we were scheduling our visits to other missionaries, we would schedule a Sunday night fireside, and I'd sit down at the piano and do the Armor of Truth, and then I would do other songs, some that he had suggested that I'd write as well. I remember one called Angel on My Shoulder that I have no clue where that thing went. I can't find it in the archive, but there might be a piece of paper somewhere. And then there was some other things that I did from the Quest that were there.
The old seminary program,
and
right?
thanks to you had taught me how to chord. And so at least
just a little bit.
At least I could chord a few songs. And then, interesting enough, as time went on, I get called back into the office in St. Louis, and I get this phone call from a zone leader, and I was currently serving as a district leader at that point in time, and I get a phone call from Elder Hanks, and he comes to me, and he looks at me, and he says, Elder Peay, he says, President says you can no longer do music in any way except for singing the hymns in church. Don't touch the piano. Don't do any writing. In addition to your missionary efforts, you're done. Wow. And I said, I'm done? What do you mean?
That's an interesting moment, isn't it?
Yeah. And he said, I don't have any answers for you. I'm just the messenger.
But this came from President Hartshorn
This
as well.
came directly from President Hartshorn. And so I'm like, okay. So I either had a choice. I could be obedient or I could be disobedient and go play the piano at a church and try and write some more songs. And I had no idea what you and I were going to do after this.
Yeah, that was completely unformed future stuff then, right?
Yeah. And so I said, well, I've tried to be obedient as a missionary, so I guess I better be obedient in this.
Isn't that interesting? You know, I didn't know President Hartshorn. I think I met him once or twice right after our missions. But he clearly had a sense of how to provide people with opportunities to grow through faith and obedience. He understood that.
Very well
put.
put.
A driven principle for him. And I don't know why he made that decision. That was probably one of those bolts of inspiration where he heard it, he communicated it, and you obeyed it. And there's no better test of whether you're out there to serve the Lord or to satisfy our own ego or whatever else. You know, it's cool to be able to go out there and sing. But man, that would be a test, right? I feel good about what I'm doing. I think I'm doing some good. And suddenly somebody says, that part of your life's over now.
So fast forward 2 months, I get called into the office as the mission historian. And that had a PR slant to it. And part of my responsibility in the office was to take my companion and go downtown and knock on executive radio stations' doors and to do my very best to work with Salt Lake to get General Conference on radios
to get it
St.
placed
Louis,
in
to
stations.
Get it placed in stations. So that was kind of an interesting anomaly. And then at one point in time, I remember it was early April in 82. He calls me into the office and he said, Elder Peay, and I'm looking at his eyebrows because they were just these big bushy eyebrows.
And you're hearing his voice right now.
And he says, I'd like you to be my assistant, but the Lord wants you to go to Nauvoo. What do you think you should do? Were his words. And I looked at him and I said, President, don't you think that I should do what the Lord wants me to do? And he said, that would be a good answer. He looked at me and he said, I'm going to send you to Edwardsville, Illinois, and you've got a missionary companion there by the name of Elder Shingleton, who you will work with. He'll be home in 2 weeks, and then you'll go to Nauvoo.
So it was your last companion in that traditional mission sense, right?
Yeah. And he said, because of your faith and obedience, you were tested not to do music. Now you'll be performing music in Nauvoo. The Lord has allowed you based upon your obedience. And I thought to myself, you know what? I finally get this principle to a certain extent. Thank you. And then off we went to Nauvoo, and that's all we did was perform and give tours and all those wonderful things. And of course, we've talked about this a little bit, but that 2 weeks in bumping into Elder Shingleton with his cousin when I come home, she's my eternal companion.
Right.
Cindy's now my eternal companion because of that 2 weeks in Edwardsville, Illinois.
All a plan and a purpose out there.
And then the rest of the story is I'd lost track of Elder Hanks, the one that had delivered the message of you have a choice of obedience not to do music. And for nearly 40 years, he carried that with him.
Like felt bad about it.
Felt bad
I had
about
to deliver this message.
Felt bad about it. And finally, one of the other elders introduced me to find out where Elder Hanks was. And it was 2 years ago, roughly, that we met up down in southern Utah. And I said, Elder Hanks, I've got to thank you for that time at the apartment in St. Louis. And you declaring that. And he said, I have worried about that for 40 years. And we embraced. And I said, well, you got to realize that your message has built a strong foundation. And I'm grateful that you were the messenger, because only you, in your very wonderful way, could have delivered that. And he was so humble as he delivered it. So it's been a very special experience through that process.
Series of experiences for sure.
So Armor of Truth was really an opportunity to explore more.
You know, it's interesting. This reminds me of the early days of the church. And maybe it was suitable and appropriate that you were in St. Louis and Nauvoo, places where some of this stuff happened. But I think about the way Joseph Smith and Brigham Young interacted with the early saints. And they often asked people to do stuff that they must have been shaking their heads.
Yeah.
They must have been saying, is this really what the Lord wants me to do? You want me to do this? You want me to uproot my family and go here and go there? And what President Hartshorn asked of you is a lot like that. And we don't get that much. I don't feel like most of us get that many of those kind of challenges today, where a bishop or a stake president or someone comes to you and says, I'm going to ask you to do something that sounds really nuts. It's a test. Maybe they don't even describe it that way. They just present that to you and say, will you do it? This is what the Lord wants of you right now. And that used to happen a lot, I think, in the early days of the church. Still happens, but I don't hear it as much.
Well, and I think that's synonymous to, a 40-year-old being called as a mission president.
Right.
And I just had an experience recently with some good friends who just got called to be mission presidents, and they were the last people that they thought
didn't see it coming, huh?
No, not at all. And so there is a sacrifice in many instances. But what's interesting is I came back to that, and President Hartshorn was really big on this. He took the word sacrifice out of our vocabulary. And he simply said, you being here is not a sacrifice. It is a privilege to serve the Lord. So he said, please change your mindset and realize that anything the Lord asks you to do, it is a privilege. And from our perspective, we probably think it's a sacrifice.
But I do think changing that perspective allows you to see the blessings in a different way.
Yes.
If you continue to believe it's a sacrifice and you're always kind of internally saying, wow, I'm putting out a lot here, Lord, you might never see the blessings. But if you can take it that way and say, what a privilege to be able to respond to this and do what you're asking me to do. And that's when you see the change and the blessings and all the good stuff that he has in mind for you.
And it's been tender as we've got people that we associate with, and even Lauren, our engineer, who gets to see this firsthand when an apostle is called. Mm-hmm. And do you think that they sometimes are deer in headlights?
Kind of the ultimate feeling, right? You want me to do what?
Yeah. And Elder Kieran made reference to that when we met him. And it was just like, me? Really? Me? And the tenderness that's associated with these apostolic calls. But in every case, I'm trying to change my mindset that whenever we serve or where we serve and have the opportunity to serve, whether we're called, whether we seek it out, whether we seek and initiate, because we want to serve, that it's a privilege to serve.
Absolutely.
And hopefully that changes our mindset into keeping it going and keeping it moving. So,
you mentioned this, and I think it's something we ought to maybe describe for some people, because early on, when we first started recording music, we treated it like a fireside in a way that we would preface every song with a little scripture tag or a thought. And we did that on a couple of albums.
Yeah.
And this is one of them. And we had people at various times say, why do you do that? But it came from a place where we'd done firesides, we'd done programs where we would try to teach some principle or share a story and then sing the song that sort of illustrated it. So today you get to hear the whole thing. You hear the actual tag that introduced this song and was the basis for this song based on the way you were asked to write it. And then we got a chance to perform it and sing it that way.
Wherefore, take unto you the whole armor of God, that ye may be able to withstand the evil day, having done all to stand. Stand therefore, having your loins girt about with truth, and having on the breastplate of righteousness, and your feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace. Above all, taking the shield of faith, wherewith ye may be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked, and take the helmet of salvation, and the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God.
Service in the Lord's kingdom, truth and honor prevail. Moroni gave us a promise, with breastplates and swords we'll set sail. Courage, honor, power. Warriors of our Father, with shields of truth in our hand. Courage to follow the Savior, in unity we will stand. Courage, honor, power. A sword and a shield, armed with the power of God. Swords and breastplates and righteousness, putting on the armor of the Lord. Be true to yourself, stand up tall and strong, and let your light shine within. Together we will be an army in unity. Courage, honor, power. Sons of Mosiah, learn not to falter. Our desire should then be the same, striving to hear the voice of the Spirit, to battle, to fight for His name. Courage, honor, power. Sword and the shield, armed with the power of God. Putting on the armor of the Lord. Swords and breastplates and righteousness, putting on the armor of the Lord. Be true to yourself, stand up tall and strong, and let your light shine within. Together we will be an army in unity.